I never thought the day would come when a simple phone call would shatter my world. It was a Tuesday morning, the kind of day that felt like it would stretch on forever. I was sitting in my home office, staring at my computer screen, working on the new updates for my scuba diving school's website. The glass of cold water on the desk had long since lost its chill, and I was already on my third round of tweaks to the site's design. My phone buzzed, a notification flashing on the screen. Brett, my neighbor across the street. We barely spoke. Small talk when we ran into each other, a polite nod or a wave if we happened to catch each other outside. But today, his name was flashing on my phone in a way that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I answered it, and his shaky voice made me pause. Zach, I just saw your wife Jenna come into your house with another man. But that's not all. I heard noises. They weren't quiet. I thought you should know. I froze. My hand trembled, but I kept my voice as cold as ice. No emotion, no panic. Just the dull thud of confusion settling in my chest. My brain struggled to make sense of what he was saying, to push past the disbelief and process the words. Are you sure it wasn't one of her coworkers? I asked, even though I could already feel the knot forming in my stomach. My mind raced, running through every possible explanation, but none of them felt right. No, man. They were naked. And this is not the type of lunch that lasts 10 minutes in the kitchen. Brett's voice was tight, strained, and I could hear him shifting around on the other end. I hung up the phone, the faint buzz of it still lingering in the air, and stared blankly at my computer screen. The words didn't sink in at first. I sat there for what felt like hours, my mind spinning in place, trying to latch onto something that made sense. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I was supposed to be working, but all I could think of was that strange, sudden feeling that my entire life had just been yanked out from under me. I didn't know what to do, but I didn't move. Not yet. In a moment of clarity, I remembered the camera I'd installed after the robbery last year, the one I put up as a precaution when a string of break-ins had hit our neighborhood. It was linked to my computer, providing a record of the last 48 hours. I didn't fly home right away, didn't storm out of my office and confront Jenna. Instead, I went straight to the computer and accessed the footage, my heart pounding in my chest, unsure of what I was going to see. The footage was a blur at first, nothing stood out, just normal, everyday moments. Jenna walking in from the garage, me leaving for work. But then, there it was. Jenna, opening the front door to let someone in. A man. I didn't recognize him at first, but then he hugged her, and they went inside. My stomach twisted as they walked toward the bedroom, the door swinging shut behind them. I stared at the screen, the images frozen in front of me. The man had been in my house. With my wife. And they weren't just talking. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the screen. I rewound the footage and watched it again, this time catching every little detail. Jenna had opened the door like it was nothing out of the ordinary, greeted him warmly, and led him straight to the bedroom. But it wasn't just this one time. The same man had appeared twice this week, at exactly the same time. Same day. Same everything. Something clicked inside me. I hadn't known this man, but now, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had seen him before. I felt a cold, creeping suspicion wrap around my heart. I didn't know how to explain what I was seeing or even how to process it. The thought of confronting Jenna was too much to bear right now. Instead, I grabbed my voice recorder, my fingers shaking as I clicked it on. I wasn't going to ask Jenna about this yet. Not until I knew more. Instead, I called her mother. Tell me, Mrs. Allison, I said, my voice a strange mix of calm and disbelief as I paced around the room, glass of water in hand. Why is the man in the video from my bedroom the same man standing on your dresser next to your wedding photo? Her voice was quiet, almost as if she were trying to convince herself that what I was saying didn't make sense. It can't be, Mrs. Allison stammered, the words barely leaving her lips. I could hear the tremor in her voice, the disbelief and fear that was creeping in. She sounded fragile, like the world she knew was suddenly crumbling at her feet. For a second, I almost felt sorry for her. But that thought quickly faded as the reality of the situation settled deeper into my gut. It's definitely him, I said, my voice sharper than I intended. Mr. Ellison, your husband, Jenna's stepfather. There was no way to sugarcoat it. The man I had just seen walking into my home with Jenna, the man who had been in my bedroom twice this week, was standing next to her mother's wedding photo. The one of them smiling in front of a flower-covered arch. The image burned into my mind like a brand, and it made me sick. I was still pacing, still clutching the glass of water in my hand, but it felt like the whole world had stopped moving around me. How had I not seen this? How had I been so blind? And yet, A part of me couldn't look away from the evidence staring me in the face. Mrs. Allison's silence on the other end of the line was deafening. I could hear her breathing, a shallow, shaky inhale that told me more than words could. She had recognized him. I knew she had. The longer the silence stretched on, the heavier the realization hit me. She couldn't deny it. Not now. I need you to explain this to me, Mrs. Allison, I said, trying to keep my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. I needed answers, and I wasn't going to back down. Why is your husband in my house with my wife, in my bedroom, twice this week? Why is he the same man who's been walking around in my life, pretending to be a guest in my own home? She took a long time to answer. I could hear her trying to find the words, but it was clear she wasn't ready to tell me the truth. I didn't give her the space to backpedal. The only thing that mattered now was finding out exactly what had been going on behind my back. What's going on, Mrs. Allison? Tell me the truth. Another long pause, and then finally, she spoke, her voice cracking under the weight of what she had to say. I never wanted you to find out like this, she whispered, her words barely audible. But I knew this day would come eventually. It's been going on for years. Ever since Jenna was a teenager. The world seemed to tilt on its axis as her words sank in. Years? My brain struggled to catch up, unable to fully process the depth of what she was saying. I could feel my grip on the glass tightening until my knuckles turned white. She had to be mistaken. This wasn't happening. Not to me. Not to my family. But she wasn't finished. Jenna never thought of you the way you thought she did, Mrs. Allison continued. She never saw you as a real husband, Zach. She married you to cover up what was really going on. All this time, she was with him, her stepfather. It was never about you. The weight of her words hit me like a freight train, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. It felt like I was suffocating under the pressure of what I was hearing. My own wife, my own flesh and blood, had been hiding this from me for years. All those late nights, all the times I thought everything was fine. All lies. I stood there, motionless, trying to absorb what she had just told me. Jenna had been married to me, had lived with me, but all the while, her true relationship had been with her stepfather, a man I had known and trusted. I couldn't make sense of it. The betrayal was so deep, so far-reaching, that it felt like my entire foundation had been ripped out from under me. You're telling me this man, Mr. Ellison, has been in my life like this for years? I managed to choke out. The anger bubbling up from deep inside me threatened to explode, but I kept it in check. For now, all I could do was listen. Mrs. Allison didn't answer right away. The silence between us was thick, suffocating. Yes, she said at last. I'm so sorry, Zach. I never wanted this for you, but it's the truth. I ended the call with a shaky breath. The air in the room felt too thick, too heavy to breathe. I had to get out of the house, had to get away from the suffocating realization of what I had just learned. Jenna, her stepfather. My life, my marriage, had been a carefully constructed lie. Every moment, every memory, tainted. But I wasn't done yet. There was still one more thing I had to do. I had to go to the police. I had to make sure that this didn't just stay hidden in the shadows any longer. When I got to the station, I didn't hesitate. I handed them the video, the damning evidence of everything that had been going on behind my back. And when they saw it, when they saw the man who had been in my home, their eyes widened. This wasn't the first time they had heard of Mr. Ellison. They'd been investigating him for something that happened years ago, an allegation that was never proven. But now, with this footage, everything was different. This wasn't just a distant rumor anymore. This was real. The police took the video from me and began to ask their questions. Jenna wasn't with me. She wasn't there, not yet. But when they brought her in, I couldn't believe what came out of her mouth. I never considered you a real man, Zach, she said flatly, as if it were no more than a casual observation. I never loved you. The marriage, it was just a cover. I needed a distraction from what was really going on. I needed to keep up appearances. And you were the perfect way to do it. I married you because it kept people from asking questions. But the truth is, I've been with my stepfather for years. It started when I was a teenager, and it never stopped. The room felt like it was spinning as I listened to her words, but I didn't say a word. There was nothing left to say. The walls of the interrogation room felt like they were closing in on me as Jenna's words hung in the air, suffocating me with their cold, brutal reality. I could hardly breathe as the words echoed in my mind, each one more damaging than the last. I never considered you a real man, Zach. Those words stung in a way I didn't think was possible. They were sharper than any slap, colder than the harshest winter wind. I tried to keep my composure, but it was like trying to hold back an ocean with my bare hands. Everything I thought I knew about my life, my marriage, my family, everything was a lie. Jenna's face was unreadable as she sat there, her arms crossed, her posture almost defiant. She didn't seem to care. She didn't seem sorry. And that was the hardest part. I had expected her to break down, to at least show some sign that she regretted what she'd done. But there was nothing. Just the same cold, indifferent look that had been in her eyes when I walked through the door this morning. The realization hit me all over again. She never loved me. Not the way I thought she did. This whole marriage, this whole life we had built together, was just a carefully constructed facade, a cover to hide what was really going on. I felt my hand shaking as I gripped the edge of the table, trying to hold onto something solid. So that's it. I managed to ask, my voice sounding hollow, as though I wasn't really there. You married me just to keep people from questioning you? Just to keep up the illusion? She nodded, as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. You were easy, Zach. You were a good, reliable husband, always there, never asking questions. It made everything easier. I never meant to hurt you, but I needed to live my life the way I wanted to. And being with him, being with my stepfather, it was the only thing that felt real to me. The room spun again, and I had to grip the edge of the table harder to keep myself from falling into the abyss that was threatening to open up beneath me. I didn't know what I was supposed to do with this information. I didn't know how I was supposed to process it, how to make sense of a life that was, in reality, nothing but a series of lies and deceit. But it wasn't just Jenna's betrayal that left me reeling. It was the other part of the story, the one I had only begun to understand, the one that had started to take shape when I saw that video of Mr. Ellison walking into my home. The man who had been part of my life, part of my family, all this time, had been involved in something far darker than I could have ever imagined. The police had filled me in on the details of his past, the investigation into his inappropriate behavior with a minor in the 90s. It had been a case that never went to trial, but the whispers and rumors had lingered. Now, with the video I had given them, everything was different. The past was no longer just a shadow, it was real, undeniable. As I sat there in the sterile, cold room, listening to Jenna's casual confession, I realized that I had been so blind. I had trusted her, believed in our life together, and I had been completely unaware of the darkness lurking beneath the surface. All those years, I had thought our marriage was just another ordinary, happy one. We went on vacations together, celebrated birthdays and anniversaries, laughed at silly jokes, built a life. But now, I couldn't shake the feeling that everything, every laugh, every moment of happiness, every "I love you" had been a carefully constructed lie. The police had already told me they were investigating Mr. Ellison for his past, and I knew this video would change everything. It wasn't just a matter of infidelity now, it was something far more sinister. And the more I thought about it, the more it became clear that Jenna's betrayal wasn't just a matter of her not loving me. It was something far more complex, far darker. She had been living a double life, and I had been too blinded by my own ignorance to see it. When the interrogation ended, I walked out of that room feeling like I had just been hit by a truck. I couldn't bring myself to look at Jenna, couldn't bring myself to say anything more to her. There was nothing left to say. The damage had been done. She had already told me everything I needed to know, and I couldn't undo it. The questions kept swirling in my mind. How could she do this? How could she live this way for so long? And how had I been so blind? I couldn't answer any of them. All I knew was that I had to leave. The drive home was a blur. I didn't feel the road beneath my tires or the passing scenery outside. My mind was too clouded, too full of everything I had just learned. I had been married to a woman who never saw me for who I was, never really cared about me in the way I thought she did. And the man I had thought of as a friend, as a part of my family, had been hiding a dark secret of his own. My life, my marriage, my entire sense of reality had been shattered in a matter of hours, and I didn't know how to put the pieces back together. When I finally made it home, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to react. But I knew one thing. I couldn't stay in this house. I couldn't stay in this life. It was over. Everything was over. By the time I walked into the house, the air felt heavy, as if the walls themselves were closing in on me. Everything seemed foreign. The familiar scent of Jenna's perfume that lingered in the hallway, the small trinkets we had collected over the years, all the little things that used to feel like home, none of it mattered now. I barely noticed the pictures on the walls, the couch where we had sat together countless times, or the kitchen table where we'd eaten our meals. It all felt distant, like I was walking through a house that wasn't mine anymore, a house that had been built on a foundation of lies. I sat down at the table, my mind replaying the interrogation, the cold truth that had been laid bare in front of me. Jenna's confession had felt like a punch to the gut, each word more painful than the last. I had never meant to be in a marriage that was based on deceit. I had never expected to discover that the woman I had loved, the woman I had trusted with everything, had been living a completely different life behind my back. But that's exactly what had happened. She had married me not because she loved me, but because it was convenient, because it was easier for her to hide the truth in plain sight. And Mr. Ellison, her stepfather, had been a part of that hidden life, a part of something I couldn't even begin to fathom. It was hard to swallow the weight of everything that had been revealed. I had always thought that if things went wrong, if we faced problems, we'd be able to work through them. We'd talk, we'd communicate, we'd fix it. But I couldn't fix this. I couldn't fix the years of lies that had been woven into the fabric of our lives. And as much as I hated it, I knew that our marriage was over. There was no coming back from this. Even if I wanted to, I couldn't unsee what I had seen. I couldn't forget what Jenna had told me. And as much as it hurt, I knew I couldn't keep living in the same house with someone who had so thoroughly betrayed me. But the most disturbing part wasn't even the betrayal itself. It was the revelation that Jenna had been involved with Mr. Ellison for so long that this had been going on under my nose for years. I kept thinking about that video, the image of him walking through my front door, the same man who had been in my life all this time, pretending to be something he wasn't. And I kept wondering how I had never noticed, how I had been so oblivious to the signs that were right in front of me. The thought that Jenna had been in a relationship with her stepfather for so many years, that it had started when she was a teenager, was something I couldn't wrap my mind around. It made me sick to my stomach, and I couldn't stop replaying her confession in my mind. Every time I thought I had processed it, a new layer of disgust and disbelief would surface. When I got to the police station, I had no idea what I was walking into. I had hoped, no, I had desperately clung to the hope that the video footage I'd provided would be enough, that the evidence would make everything clear, that it would finally bring justice to light. But what I hadn't expected was the way the officers reacted when they saw the footage. It wasn't just a case of infidelity, it was far darker than that. Mr. Ellison had a past, one that the police had been investigating for years, a history that stretched back to the 90s. Allegations of inappropriate behavior with a minor had never been proven. But now, with the video I had given them, they had something concrete. It was like a switch had been flipped. This wasn't just a family drama anymore. This was a criminal investigation. I could see the shift in their demeanor as they watched the footage. It was a subtle change at first, but then the questions started coming faster, with more urgency. They were focused now, their attention fixed on the man in the video, the man who had been in my house, the man who had been a part of my life for so long. Mr. Ellison wasn't just some guy Jenna had been seeing behind my back. He was a part of something far more dangerous, something I had never even considered. And as they began to piece together the timeline of events, I realized how deep this went. It wasn't just a marriage built on lies. It was a web of manipulation, of secrets, of things I could never have imagined. But it wasn't just Mr. Ellison's past that was coming into focus. It was Jenna's role in all of it, her complicity. When they brought her in for questioning, I sat back, my mind racing with everything I had just learned. The police didn't waste any time. They went straight for the heart of it. And to my surprise, Jenna didn't try to deny anything. She didn't try to justify herself or make excuses. She just sat there, her face blank, as if none of this was a big deal to her. She admitted everything, and in doing so, she revealed just how far the betrayal went. The worst part wasn't even her relationship with Mr. Ellison. It was the way she spoke about it, the way she dismissed everything I had thought was real. "You were just a cover, Zach," she said, her voice flat, like she was talking about something trivial. "I didn't want anyone to suspect anything. You were the perfect distraction. We were never really a family. You were just part of the illusion." The words stung in a way I couldn't even explain. It wasn't just the betrayal that hurt. It was the coldness, the complete lack of remorse. She didn't care. Not about me. Not about what we had built together. It was like I had been a pawn in her game, and once the game was over, she had no problem throwing me away. I walked out of the interrogation room feeling like I had just lost everything. My heart wasn't broken. It was shattered into 1,000 pieces, and there was no putting it back together. But what hit me the hardest was the truth about Jenna. She had never seen me for who I was. She had never loved me the way I thought she did. She had used me. And worse, she had used me to hide a far darker truth. When I got home, I knew there was no coming back from this. There was no fixing this. And as I sat in the silence of that house, surrounded by the remnants of my life, I realized that I had to let it all go. There was nothing left to hold on to. I came home to an empty house. The silence pressed against me, a constant reminder of everything that had just unraveled. The weight of it all, Jenna's betrayal, the lies, Mr. Ellison's twisted involvement, felt like a suffocating fog that wouldn't lift. It was surreal, like I had stepped into a new reality, one where nothing made sense anymore. The life I had spent years building had been nothing but a carefully constructed lie. I had spent my time worrying about the small things, the usual challenges of married life, but none of it mattered now. The grand scheme of things was something entirely different, and I had been too blind to see it. I stood in the kitchen for what felt like hours, staring at the empty countertops. I had always imagined this house would be where I would grow old, where I'd spend the rest of my days with Jenna, our lives intertwined in a quiet, comfortable rhythm. But that dream had vanished. What was left was a shell of a life, one I couldn't bring myself to look at for much longer. I couldn't stand being in that house any longer, surrounded by the things that reminded me of a life I no longer recognized. So, I grabbed my jacket, turned off my phone, and walked out without a plan. The only thing I knew for sure was that I couldn't stay there. Not with all the memories that had turned to ash, not with the suffocating weight of everything that had happened. I got into my truck and started the engine, but I didn't drive away. Instead, I made a turn, heading down the road toward Brett's house. Brett, the neighbor who had called me earlier, the one who had pointed me in the right direction when everything was falling apart. I hadn't spoken to him much before this, but he had been the one to alert me, the one who had shown me that something was wrong when I couldn't see it myself. He wasn't just a neighbor anymore. After everything that had happened, after he had given me the truth when I needed it the most, he had become something more. He had become a lifeline in a sea of confusion. When I pulled into Brett's driveway, I saw him on the porch, sitting in the same place where I had always waved a half-hearted hello. The same place where we had exchanged a few words here and there about the weather or the neighborhood gossip. This time, though, there was no distance between us. There was no polite nod or brief conversation. There was only the quiet understanding that had formed between us in the wake of everything that had happened. He didn't need to ask how I was doing. I could tell by the look in his eyes that he already knew. I got out of the truck, walked up to the porch, and sat down beside him without saying a word. Brett cracked open a beer, handed it to me, and I accepted it without thinking. I wasn't thirsty, but I needed something to hold on to, something to remind me that I wasn't completely alone in all of this. I took a long pull from the bottle, feeling the coolness of it against my throat as it slid down. The taste was bitter, but it didn't matter. It wasn't about the beer. It was about the silence, the shared understanding between two people who had both witnessed something fall apart, something that could never be repaired. Brett didn't speak right away. He just sat there, quietly sipping his drink, his gaze fixed on the empty street in front of us. It felt like hours passed in that silence, but in a way, it was comforting. Neither of us needed to fill the space with words. There was nothing to say that would make any of it easier. There was no magic phrase that could undo what had been done, no way to turn back time and fix everything that had been broken. So we sat there, side by side, in a quiet companionship that spoke louder than any conversation could. After a while, I took another drink, my hands still trembling slightly. The feeling of betrayal was still there, raw and open, but there was something about being here, with Brett, in this moment of stillness, that gave me a sense of peace. It wasn't closure, not by any means, but it was a small step forward. I wasn't sure where I was going next, but for the first time since everything had started to unravel, I felt like I could breathe again. Like, maybe, just maybe, I wasn't as lost as I had thought. Brett raised his bottle, offering a silent toast. I clinked mine against his, the sound sharp in the stillness of the evening. No words were needed. We both knew what this was, an acknowledgement of the pain, of the betrayal, but also of the resilience that would carry me forward. You didn't save me from betrayal, I said quietly, my voice steady now, but carrying the weight of everything I had just learned. You saved me from insanity. Brett nodded, his expression softening just slightly. He didn't need to say anything in response. The weight of his presence, of the simple act of being here, was enough. We sat there for a long time after that, in the kind of silence that doesn't need to be filled with anything. Just two men who had seen the world change in a way they never expected, but who, somehow, had found a way to sit with it together. And though my heart was still broken, though I didn't have all the answers, I knew one thing for certain: I would be okay. It might take time, it might take more than I could imagine, but I would move forward. There was a whole world waiting for me out there, one I couldn't even begin to comprehend yet, but it was mine to explore. And with that, I took another drink, looked out at the horizon, and allowed myself a moment of peace.